Good evening. Thank you all. Good evening. Well done. Good evening and welcome. I'm Jerry Herron, Dean of the Irvin D. Reed Honors College, which will soon be celebrating our 10th anniversary. I'm pleased to recognize two additional 10th anniversaries this evening. Today's FOCIS program is the second in the series on the 10th anniversary of both FOCIS and the Applebaum Chair in Community Engagement. Our anniversary theme for FOCIS is What in the World is Going On? Timely, don't you? I ask that you take this opportunity now, please, to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. Now, please join me in welcoming Director of FOCIS and holder of the Applebaum Chair, President Emeritus, Dr. Irvin D. Reed.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Thank you so much for being here. In 2017, anyone who still denies that the Civil War was about race understands nothing about this nation's history or the long and bloody road of emancipation. Although the war ended more than 150 years ago, race is still the most powerful force dividing the country. I think it is hard to argue that assertion, but the assessment is not new. In October 1890, the abolitionist Frederick Douglass proposed that the true problem is not the Negro, but the nation. And it is. Since Douglass, black writers and orators have sounded the alarm for America. Unforgettable names like W. Du Bois, Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Toni Morris, and of course tonight's speaker, and many, many others. And their work and influence has not gone unrewarded. One thinks of the 15th Amendment, Brown versus the Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act, and the election, of course, of Barack Obama. If those instances of real progress were the whole story, American history would be very different, and we would be a very different country. But a proper perspective on the state of race in America since Frederick Douglass necessarily must encompass lynchings, Jim Crow laws, the Birmingham church bombings, the assassination of Dr. King, the massacre in Charleston, the violence in Charlottesville, the persecution of black citizens by law enforcement, the shootings of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and the election of a president whose candidacy was blessed by the Ku Klux Klan. Clearly, America is still a nation divided, whether it acknowledges it or not. But for Americans to deal positively with our often violent history of racial prejudice, we must first admit and deal with the many enduring myths and manifestations of white privilege and white supremacy. Unfortunately, white supremacy is as much a part of American history as the Constitution, and its evils have been every bit as long-lasting. Which is not to say that the long battle to have the nation live up to the promises for all Americans have no white support. Bobby Kennedy comes first to mind. Though he began his political career clueless about the black experience in America, he learned quickly and well, standing up against racism in the North and the South, crusading against joblessness and hunger, and using his position as a U.S. Senator to pioneer anti-poverty programs. It has been said that by the time of his death in 1968, he was the most trusted white man in black America. Many dedicated white people also joined the large company of black martyrs in the cause. One thinks of William Lewis Moore, a postman from Baltimore, who in 1963 was shot and killed during a one-man march against segregation. In 1965, Reverend James Reeb, a Unitarian minister who joined marches in Selma, was beaten to death by a white man on the city street. And we must not forget Detroit's own Viola Liuzzo, murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in Alabama that same year. Reconciling the races in this country has never been, nor ever will be, a simple process. It will not be easy, nor will it happen at once. As we all know, an undercurrent of rage is simmering even now in the nation's black communities. But to deny that we have made progress in race relations would be, as Barack Obama said, to deny America's capacity to change. If racial prejudices are learned, then they can be unlearned and overcome. It is this conviction and change is not only necessary, but possible that must be the basis of our hope for the nation's future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this evening, and I invite you to be a part of what will be a very lively discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. At this point in the program, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. M. Roy Wilson, the 12th president of Wayne State University. Dr. Wilson was, oh, he's here. Well, I have my wonderful script of Dr. Wilson, but he is already here. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the 12th president of the university.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Great to see you all here today. I'm just going to keep my comments very, very short. The first thing I want to do is recognize some special people here. We have members of our Board of Governors, Chair Sandra O'Brien, Dana Thompson, and Kim Trent. And I also saw two board emeriti, and I want to recognize them also. Jackie Washington is over there, and Bernice Anthony. Let me just also recognize my wife, Jacqueline, who is so supportive. So, FOCIS, Forum on Contemporary Issues in Society. Now, there's been a long and distinguished history of FOCIS on Wayne State's campus. And the thing that I really like about it is that it encourages dialogue, frank dialogue and discussion, sometimes of subject matters that are not easy to talk about, and today's forum is certainly a case in point. So this is the last of the first series of events, and of course this one is on race. But what I do want to also mention is that this whole first series, as well as the next series coming, starting in January, is very special for two reasons. One is the 10th anniversary of FOCIS, and the second is that next year we'll be celebrating our 150th birthday. I have to keep reminding myself what it's called, but it's the sesquicentennial. Okay. So we'll be celebrating our sesquicentennial next year also. So the FOCIS events will be extra special, as is this one. You know, when you think about race, it's actually a very difficult topic to talk about, and I think that sometimes it's not talked about adequately. You know, it's often couched in the more broader concept of diversity and inclusion. And those of you who know me know that I'm all for diversity and inclusion, so that's not anything against diversity and inclusion, but I do think that when it's couched in that way, that it does also obscure the fact that race in the United States has had a very long, very complex political and social history. It's a political and social construct that is uniquely American. And that's embedded in the fact that, you know, African Americans have actually been in slavery more years than they've been free. When you think about the 265 years or so of chattel slavery, and then about 100 years after that until the Civil Rights Act, and when you had frank segregation. And then for the decades after, I would argue that there's been, you know, several decades, even some people might argue even now, where you had de facto segregation. And so race is couched in those areas, and it has that complex history, and that's why it is sometimes so difficult to talk about. Having said that, you know, I think that we have the right person, and I'm not going to go into a detailed introduction of our speaker, Dr. Dyson, because President Reed will do that. But I do know that he is an outstanding person to be able to have this very frank discussion. You know, I'd like to say that race has been something that I've been very interested in also from a scholarly perspective, and I've written 3 or 4 articles on it from a medical perspective in terms of trying to define race and what it means and what it doesn't mean. But Dr. Dyson is really a real scholar of the first order when it comes to race. And as I mentioned already, it's so important to have these very frank dialogues. And I hate to say this, but I think it's true, is probably more important now than almost any other time in our history, because we can't go backwards. We have to continue to move forwards. And so this is a very important time to have that very frank discussion. And so with that, I'm going to have Dr. Reed come back up and do a proper introduction of our guest speaker.
I'm going to save that introduction I had of Dr. Wilson for the next program. I'm not going to throw it away. The script is written. Michael Eric Dyson was born in Detroit and attended Cranbrook School and Northwestern High School. For a while as a young man, he worked in factories and supported his family, but eventually left Detroit to attend university. He received a bachelor's degree magna cum laude from Carson Newman College and a master's and PhDs in religion from Princeton University. Since 2007, Dr. Dyson has been a professor of sociology at Georgetown University in Washington. The Philadelphia Weekly hails him as reshaping what it means to be a public intellectual by becoming the most visible black academic of his time. Ebony magazine has named Dr. Dyson one of the nation's 100 most influential African Americans and one of the 150 most powerful. Dr. Dyson is the author of 20 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. His 1994 book, Making Malcolm, The Myth and Meaning of Malcolm X, was chosen by the Times as a notable book of the year. 2 of his books have won NAACP Image Awards. A third, Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster, won the American Book Award in 2007. Dr. Dyson contributes opinion columns to the New York Times and is contributing editor for the New Republic and ESPN's The Undefeated, a website exploring the relationships of race, sports, and culture. His most recent book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, was chosen by the Washington Post as one of the books everyone should read in 2017. It has the qualities of all good sermons, articulate, provocative, and spoken from the heart. Dr. Dyson comes by his talent from preaching honestly, having become an ordained Baptist minister at the age of 19. I do not know what convictions led him to that vocation, but for many years his calling has been both visionary and deeply personal, for he is on nothing less than a mission to save the nation's soul. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank you very kindly. To President Wilson, to former President Reed, thank you for that very gracious introduction, and to President Wilson for his ongoing leadership and generosity, and to the extraordinary people of Wayne State University and Detroit more broadly. It's great to be home in the D. It's always good to come back here, people trying to take my city's name in vain, and I ain't having it. And I saw so many other people here, Dean Karen Lloyd, from Oakland University, Councilwoman Cockrell, and so many other dear friends and wonderful brothers and sisters who are here. I want to thank Sister Pam William for her excellent stewardship since we've been here, and of course the Chief of Police. Love the police. When the police love me. And a real honor to be here with the extraordinary work that President Wilson is doing, extending the legacy that was bequeathed to him and creating in his own fashion and style a new one. And then former President Reed, with his ongoing engagement with this great university and with the people of this community. Now, tonight, I want to reflect on this subject of race in America. And we know that we are living in often provocative and perilous times. We are living in the midst of one of the most unusual curves in the graph of race in the history of this nation. We think about the fact that America, for the last year, has been in the throes of a democratic experiment, the likes of which it has not seen in quite some time. And beyond that, when we think about the complicated convergence of factors that have defined the anatomy of American identity, race remains at the heart of those issues. Race, indeed, is not only the great unresolved conflict of America, it continues to be the driving and even motivating force, sometimes explicitly, sometimes subtly, sometimes consciously and often unconsciously, for many of the developments that shape American identity. We have, in the span of a few years, seen the first black president of the United States of America, followed in quick succession by a man who doubted the legitimacy and validity of his American citizenship, who engaged in rather problematic denunciations of his person, and then engaged in some of the most vilifying, vicious, vituperative voicings of vehement denunciations of humanity. And at the same time, he's a kind of pressure valve to release the suppressed tension and hostility that had accumulated around issues of race in America. And now it seems that we are in a different atmosphere, in a different zone. The nastiness and the brutality and the viciousness and the inability to acknowledge the humanity of the other seem to have been hyped up even more. It is not that racial dissension has been created more than revealed. And yet, something else is afoot. The profound disparaging of the other that we see taken routinely. When this particular president ran for office, he announced it by damning Mexicans, calling them out of their names, misrepresenting their true nature. He went on to cast aspersions against people who were Muslims and who followed Islam. He disparaged people of color. He refused to take seriously women as equals, and we see the vicious aftermath of centuries of sexual harassment of women. Now people are getting their comeuppance on both sides of the aisle. That's a bipartisan affair, sexism, right? Just like racism is too. We like to think on the progressive side, on the left side, that we are more enlightened, that we treat women differently. We just deny them salary with better words. We just extend to black and brown and other poor people our denial of their humanity with gentler phrases. I think about engaging the work of Professor Jerry Herron here and Professor Melba Boyd, who have taught us about the need to engage difference with particular insight and rigor. And yet, in America, we now see the unleashing of a horrible sentiment and passion against the vulnerable. We have a head of state who gets up every morning to excrete the feces of moral depravity in a nation that he has turned into his psychic commode. And so this has granted permission to people to be uglier. Tiki torch carrying young bigots, well coiffed, their follicular fidelity not in question, Their nice suits, not in denial, and yet they carried the baggage of ancient hoary beliefs about difference and otherness. It is now common to beat up on gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, and trans people. Transphobia, homophobia, hatred of the queer. And what we now must understand when we deal with difference is that everybody in the same boat. Your black Christianity can no longer be tolerated to denounce the legitimacy of a gay person in the name of your religion, and you don't look like the very bigots that you hate. Ain't no asterisks. And if you got an asterisk, your ass ain't at risk. Excuse me, Mr. President. And Mrs. Wilson. And so, there ain't no asterisk. You get to be mad that because you're a victim of racial oppression, you have a legitimate reason to deal viciously with people who are gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual because of your religion. No more than white brothers and sisters who are part of a white working class, and they say that this last election was a referendum of the white working class. How about the working class? Everybody in the working class ain't voted for this man. There were not black and brown members of that class voting for him. So isn't it interesting at the same time that the left and right converged when they said we are tired of identity politics? Oh, really? When the identity ain't yours. Oh, I see. Identity politics have been the very basis of American politics from the get-go. When they name black people as 3/5 human, that's identity politics. When they said that only land-owning white men could be the basis of American democratic energy, that is identity politics. When women and people of color were denied the right to vote, that's identity politics. But now that we get a chance to use it on our behalf, all of a sudden you tired of it. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump disparaged it. And so what's interesting is that you don't have the right as white working class people to deny the history and legacy of blocking black and brown people from unions that you enjoyed the benefit of. You ain't got to be rich to have white privilege. I hear white people make that mistake all the time. I don't run anything, and I know you don't. Most white folk ain't running stuff. It's just a few peoples doing that. But here's one of the greatest consequences of white privilege. You can walk down the street, meet a police person, and live to tell about it. You ain't got to have no money to do that. Just the right color and the right connection. And so when I think about where we are as a nation grappling with race, we are living in perilous times. And the convergence of the isms is rather remarkable because it underscores that we together must engage in reflection on where we are existentially, politically, and ideologically in order for us to make progress. We all in the same ship. We all in the same boat. And unless we realize that, we will not make progress. And, you know, I was talking to a television reporter today, and he was talking about, well, some people, white folk, are just upset with political correctness. I said, political correctness is just a term that people use when they're tired of being called on their bigotry and no longer can get away with it. Oh, my Jiminy Cricket, you're being politically correct. You just mad because folk calling you out for the stuff you saying. Because the same people who are tired of political correctness don't even want Colin Kaepernick bowing down. Why are you being so politically correct about the flag? Why are you being so politically correct about politically correctness? Why are you being so politically correct about an anthem? It ain't about no anthem. He's taking a knee because people of color have been routinely hammered, hurt, and harassed by police people in America, and it's time to stop. Plus, the song is about Latinos anyway. Ho, ho, say, can you see? Jose, yeah, man, Mio, what? So we now taught to be afraid. The present political order would make us think it's the incoming immigrants who are taking our jobs. It's not the Mexicans or the Dominicans or the Puerto Ricans or the Cubans. It's the right-wing Republicans who are messing us up, unleashing the vitriol of their denunciation of their humanity and the humanity of the others. And all that stuff goes together. Racism, sexism, homophobia, classism. The same folk that don't like Negroes don't like women. Be grabbing them. You ain't got to grab nothing. That's one of the consequences of denying the legitimate lessons you can learn from enlightened black men. You don't have to grab anything. Be confident in your ability to procure reciprocal affection predicated upon acknowledgement of your humanity and hers. You ain't got to grab it, call it. The great philosopher Christopher Wallace said, some say the X makes the sex spectacular. Make me lick you from your neck to your back then. He said, if it's all right with you, tonight we're loving. That sounds like the request for permission. That ain't grabbing it, that's asking for it. With a little bit of swag. And let's be honest, when we look at the racial predicament we find ourselves in, not only the convergence of different isms, not only the demonization of one versus the other, not only taking refuge in our own form of oppression so that we can oppress somebody else, part of the problem is folk just mad that a Negro was in charge. Y'all got a good-looking president. You had a good-looking president before him. They both got swag. Black men with swag tend to just irritate people. You know, you show up, you ain't even got no money in the bank, but you got plenty of holler. Verbal dexterity and rhetorical facility, and the stereotype that helps us out extra. All bigotries are not equally created. Oh, Jesus. Just mad that the man had the title president. Now, we can make up a bunch of words, and I can give you some philosophically acute notions, and I can talk about rival epistemologies, and I can talk about the insurrection of subjugated knowledge with Michel Foucault in terms of postmodern theory and post-structuralist identity, and I can speak to you about the way in which the subaltern must speak and how race must challenge the hegemony and dominance of the center, but at the end of the day, just mad because a Negro had a title that you mad at. I wish he'd have come out the White House sometimes just upset. Such a nice Negro. Call him names? Yes, we can. I wish he'd come out the White House sometime with a skull cap on, with a gold grill, with a terry cloth robe, and some of them Magic Johnson long socks, and saying, "What? This is my crib. I'm living in public housing." He was so nice when they said nasty stuff to him, and they still thought he was un-American. Went to Harvard, they still question his intelligence. Wife graduated from Princeton and Harvard. Him from Columbia and Harvard. That's a double Ivy League for both of them. I ain't saying that make you smart, but people in America be saying that make you smart. And if y'all say that makes you smart, why you saying he ain't smart? Why you changing the rules when he get involved? And I got plenty of criticisms of Obama. Don't get it twisted. I shared them in my book. I'm not one of these Kool-Aid drinkers, but I'm saying at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, a lot of the animus that he faced was for no other reason than his skin color. And I just wish, like the time he went, I wanted to be his anger translator. He was giving the State of the Union address. He says, I don't have any more races to run. And they start clapping, the Republicans. Yeah. He said, that's because I beat you twice. Now that was nice, but let me tell you how I would have said that for him. Look, bitch, I done beat you twice. I can't whip your ass no more because the law don't allow it. And if I had a chance, I'd whip your ass again. Something like that, I mean. And so the fault line in America that we confront today was seen most clearly, felt most perceptibly, when the race quake of an Obama presidency challenged both the unconscious and conscious bigotry and animus of many Americans who felt that he didn't deserve to be there. The hatred for him was deep and unyielding. I'm not suggesting that every criticism of Obama was motivated by racism. That is not true. What I am saying, however, is that racial animus motivated so much hatred of him that it obscured the ability to even engage in legitimate critique of the man from the beginning, because it was almost indistinguishable from the hatred that prevailed. Why is it that the very man who challenged his credentials, an inveterately inarticulate specimen of rhetorical volubility, a man who has 25 words in his vocabulary, sad, bad, bigly, huge, see dick run. You mad that the man who had the job before you could speak, could give speeches, could inspire people because of high-flown rhetoric, a golden throat and a silver tongue, and the mastery of the English language, speaking the king's English to the queen's tastes? The ability to know what a gerund and a participle was, the agreement between noun and verb, not misspelling on Twitter. Going after people. Never again shall America have a stereotypical understanding of what it means to be a recipient of affirmative action, because given what you mean by that, which is a distortion of the real thing, this is the worst example ever. Ain't got no skills, no talent to be no president, right? This is what racism will do. It will cloud even white brothers and sisters. 54% of eligible white women voted for Trump. 13% of black men did too. What they was on. Probably opioid addicted. Oh, I'm sorry, that's reserved for only people now. Because when Negroes were on crack, that was criminal. When black people were on drugs, we got sent to jail. Now they get sent to the hospital. Black people got criminalized. Latino people got criminalized. White brothers and sisters get medicalized and hospitalized. Now, I ain't mad. That's what you should be getting. But so should we. We ain't saying opioid addiction ain't real. We saying when we was addicted, I know it's were, when we was addicted, we got evicted. We got put out of our homes. We got denied legitimacy. as citizens. We got called super predators. We got called nihilistic, criminal, pathological thugs. But all of a sudden, the discourse has shifted. The very man stood up the other day in the presidency as president and said that we should be sensitive to our fellow citizens who are opioid addiction, because young white people who are addicted to meth and heroin are treated differently than young black and brown people who were addicted to their drugs in their own era. This is race in America. Even when black and brown people go to the doctor, they get different drugs. They don't even think black folk hurt the same way. So they only give us pain relief like we stronger. We're a stronger animal than that. Oh, hell, Shaniqua doesn't need that. Jamal's gonna be fine. And so the medical apartheid that distributes medicine and pain relief and it administers medical intervention in the name of humane care for the other, first do no harm. There's plenty of harm done within the medical profession because race seeps into it. And so when we talk about race in America, we're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. The convergence of these isms, hiding behind your form of oppression to make sure that you can collar at somebody else and reproduce theirs. The inability to understand that so much of the animus in this country politically happened because a black president got power and people got upset. We must see that white working class people have more in common with black and brown working class people than anybody else. These billionaires ain't your friend. These bros ain't loyal. They don't love them bros. The rich don't like you because they share your race. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson who said that if you can convince a poor white person that he is better than the Negro beneath them, you can pick his pockets. He said, hell, make him hate them enough, he'll pick his pockets for you. Don't we see that happening again? Martin Luther King Jr. was in jail in the 60s in Birmingham, 63. His jailers and warden came to him saying, Dr. King, you're wrong. Segregation is right, integration is wrong. He said, no, it's not. And then he asked them, how much money do you make? And when they told him, he said, hell, you need to be out here marching with us. People tell me, well, white working class people voted for Trump because they were tired of being victimized by trade policies and passed over for consideration of jobs that went to black and brown people. Black and brown people ain't running Nathan. That would be a colloquial expression for nothing, except chicken joints and prison. Thank you for that very, very much. How many presidents have there been that black? Half. Right? They won't even let him have it all the way. White people told me, you know he's half us, you know. I said, there's some half brothers in prison too. Holla at them. You gave them up for black. They're interracial as well. They are mixed as well. Yes, we should accentuate, underscore, and highlight interracial mixing. It is the beautiful possibility of multiplicities of identity convergence. We should celebrate that. But at the same time, let's not act like we don't know that in America, race is so dominant in a negative fashion that it eradicates all of the beautiful complexity of our racial identity. So we ain't had but one half a black president. We ain't had many of us running no major corporations in America. Most of the people who are senators have been white. Most of the people, Congress people, have been white. What are black people running? This mythology that black and brown people are taking over. When you look at affirmative action, the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action have been white women. And when you put together other able people and white women, they are numerically dominant in the distribution of goods and resources under the rubric of affirmative action. So when we look at every index in America, black and brown kids and native kids are still being kicked out of school earlier. Police people are put in our schools in ways that are not happening in the suburbs. Suburban schools get millions and millions and millions of dollars to reconstitute and reconstruct their infrastructure, while inner city schools continue to be depleted of their resources. We still base the distribution of resources in many ways upon the tax base of the local community and property ownership. Black and brown people continue to get held up, literally, by the law when they get fined for stuff that they shouldn't be fined for. And so when we look at it across the board, we still see that racism dominates not just in personal sensibility and sentiment, but in institutional inequality that is perpetuated over space and time. And so what we gonna do? I'm gonna talk about that, then we'll have a conversation. First thing we gotta do is face the problem. Gore Vidal said, we live in the United States of amnesia. A lot of us in America just addicted to forgetfulness. We don't want to remember. Barbra Streisand sang the song. I know some of y'all too young to know who Barbra Streisand is. Y'all stuck on Taylor Swift, but little Katy Perry, I ain't mad, but I'm saying Barbra Streisand. Huh? Memories like the corners of my mind. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Then my girl Gladys Knight remade that, didn't she? She killed that. Misty watercolored memories of the way we were. Then the Temptations killed it too. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Y'all stuck on Future. Let's fuck on some commas, let's fuck on some commas, 100,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 100,000. I don't even, what is he saying? What are you saying? But bad and bougie. What? Damn. Know what I'm saying? No, actually I don't. And so we got to face the problems. We got to face the realities. Barbra Streisand said, what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. They're my old people. Oh, you youngins up in here represent the old people. Songs y'all don't know. Dances y'all don't know how to do. Y'all don't know nothing about that. You youngsters, y'all ain't the only one that can dance. And so, what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. So we eradicate, lie, distort, wipe out, pretend it doesn't exist. That amnesia that forces us to say that, oh, the Great War, what the civil rights historians call that late unpleasantness, wasn't about slavery. It was about states' rights. States' rights to do what? Own slaves. What you mad at, son? Are you telling me you fought a war for states' rights? Brother and sister in America who were white against each other over the ownership of the right to say your state could do what it wanted to do. It was about how you could hold people against their will, how you could enslave human beings, call them lazy while you worked them to death. And until we grapple with the civil war that's going on even right now in America, where white brothers and sisters have been taught to hate those who are unlike them because they've been sold a bill of goods that these people are taking your jobs and your rightful place and they are being promoted above you, that is not the case. What is the case is that there is extreme manipulation from above by a few elites who, regardless of color, engage in a mass robbery of the resources of the masses, like a tax bill that redistributes wealth upward. Working class white folk ain't being benefited by this administration when you got a billionaire as your Secretary of Education, just to get local with it. When you got another local person up in HUD. You ain't got to be a brain surgeon. And then you be thinking that the slaves were immigrants. Stick to separating twins, homie. And separate yourself from that bullshit that you're talking. Excuse me, the flibberty gibbet of mendacity. They are not the friends of working class white people. From the very beginning, white brothers and sisters have been pitted against black brothers and sisters and brown brothers and sisters and those who are Asian from the Pacific Rim and other places. And at the end of the day, the amnesia clots the arteries. And what you must understand is that the manipulation from above of those who don't have the interest of all Americans at heart to pretend that this Civil War was motivated by pure economic considerations or fights and fisticuffs and pugilistic exercises over the occupation of territory. At the end of the day, it was about the unlimited possibility of the ownership of the other. And so even now, we have conversations, so many conversations about race in America, and folk just ain't even informed. You ain't gonna have no conversation about, I don't know, de Broglie and Heisenberg about quantum mechanics, and you ain't studied nothing. You don't know no math, no trigonometry, but you gonna debate what Einstein said. Well, I don't think Einstein really knew what the hell he was talking about. That E equals MC squared sounds very crazy to me. But we think we can talk about complicated notions of race and gender, sexuality and class, and don't know nothing. Got an opinion, but it's ill-informed. You don't know what you're talking about. So until you educate yourself, cease speaking. Ludwig Wittgenstein said, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. The rapper said, you talk too much, homeboy, you never shut up. And so we got to confront the problem. That means that we have to be honest about the fact that we got a problem. Number two, not only must we face the problem, but white folk got to talk about race too. Now they do, but I'm talking about explicitly, in public. Or they talk about it at the crib all the time. You go home for Thanksgiving right now, you're going to get some race conversation, right? And I know none of you in here are like that, but some of your family members are. So I want you to do me a favor. When you go home for Thanksgiving this year, when you hear them little racist jokes, and you will, don't be uncomfortable. I already know. I've been there. There's a fly on the wall. When you hear the little racist jokes or you hear the comments about these people don't want to work while you're getting a handout yourself, whiteness is very interesting because it doesn't understand how it got the hookup from the start, right? White folk don't want to talk about race because you see, affirmative action was a white thing. The GI Bill was affirmative action. What happened? Returning men, mostly from the World War II, mostly white, what did they get? Points on a test to get in school, hookup, affirmative action. More money to buy a crib, better loans to get you into the middle class because home ownership is the elevator and the escalator to class mobility and upward striving. Then they got money to buy a crib. To procure a home. A house, a schoolroom, and a job. You didn't earn that. That was given as a result of the service. Now, When I say earn, I don't mean that you didn't do work and you didn't go to the war. What I'm suggesting, however, is that the GI Bill, and if you read Ira Katznelson's book, When Affirmative Action Was White, he talks about how essentially the white middle class was established upon the economic mandates that were in force as a result of that law. And so the same people who were benefited turn around and want to dog somebody else getting it. And not nearly as much and not nearly as explicitly. And so white brothers and sisters have to talk about race too. So when you go to your home for Thanksgiving, now eat the pumpkin pie first. Don't get crazy. Don't start having deconstructing granny moments before you get the turkey. Get the turkey first, watch the Lions for one half. Watch Matthew Stafford slang that rock. Then, when you hear some of those opprobrious sentiments and those nasty beliefs, then you can challenge them, because folk like me ain't gonna never get in your crib to challenge them. Not inside the heads of your brothers and sisters, your mamas and daddies, your uncles and cousins, your grandpeople, but you can. Be ambassadors for enlightenment. Be ambassadors for saying, I go to school at Wayne State. They're good people. They're like us. Most of them are average, a few geniuses and some assholes. That's everybody. That's your family and mine. Okay, maybe I got a few more assholes in mine. But what I'm saying to you is that that's what it is. So when white folk begin to talk about race, then they have to talk about white privilege. It's something white folk don't want to do. But Jiminy Cricket, I don't have any more privilege. Yeah, you do. If folk ain't following you around when you go to the store, follow me around when I go into the store assuming I ain't got no money to pay. I don't, but hey, that's irrelevant. Neither does Jimmy. But they ain't following him. They don't follow Jimmy to ask if he got some weed on him, and Jimmy got plenty of weed. Per capita, white folk make more money than black folk. It stands to reason you got more weed cash. Just based on the economics, the police should be freaking down and frisking white folk. But they're always after black folk. We living from paycheck to paycheck. We ain't got no extra dough for weed. And yet white brothers and sisters don't admit they get the hook up there. Disproportionate numbers of black and brown people in prison and in jail, going there for nonviolent drug offenses. Many white people come out and tell the truth. I smoked dope, I did this, I did that, didn't get caught, didn't even get suspected. And the very politics of suspicion in this country leads people to racially profile people of color. And so when white folk begin to tell the truth about race, talk about race, be honest about race, then we can have a vigorous conversation. It don't mean you always got to agree with black and brown people. I teach at a predominantly black school like Georgetown. A well-known historically black college. Most of my students are white. I get letters from irate parents calling me out of my name. You nigger. I get called nigger so much. All I ask now, please call me Professor Nigger. That's all I want. Please. If you can't do that, just Dr. Nigger. Just, dear Dr. Nigger. I mean, then go on and cut me down. And be misspelling their words while calling me dumb. I send their letters back corrected. You misspelled dumbass nigger. And then the crackerocracy gets real pissed. I get letters, comments, mad, and then they accuse me of trying to distort their children's minds. I am, because I'm trying to distort the distortion you gave. So if I distort the distortion, maybe they can be a bit clearer. I'm not arrogant. I'm not suggesting that I am without sin or fault. I ask my students to engage me. I criticize myself in class. I know they will. I'm criticizing myself. Maybe I should have thought that differently, or that book I wrote, maybe I disagree with myself now, or you should open your mind. I encourage my students to engage me. So I get these letters from their parents and people who claim to represent them. Georgetown has gone to hell in a handbasket by giving you a professorship. They're paying you too much damn money, not enough. And they could pay me more than the president, but that wouldn't be enough. Because you paying me not for me, you paying me for great, 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 great granddaddy. And I'm just saying, you can't pay them, but I is available. I believe in individual reparations accounts. You ain't got 40 acres and a mule? That's cool. Give me 1 acre on Wall Street. And if you don't have a mule, give me a Jaguar. Call it a day. So white folk mad at me, say nasty things, wonder why black folk can say nigger and they can't say nigger. You're a racist. No, sir, you invented the term, we hijacked it. We did a carjacking of your term. And now we use the term. Now, not some of us who are black don't agree with it. I get that. We have internecine squabbles and family disagreements, but I'm an inveterate deployer of the word nigger. But it's nigger, not nigger. And we mean many things by it. Hello, nigga. We get excited, nigga. We get upset, nigga. We are really happy, nigga. Then we are suspecting and skeptical, nigga. Then we're dismissive, nigga, please. There's a sensual diversity to that term, but you got to be inside to understand that. That ain't your term outside. White privilege makes you believe you should control every word. You can't. That's part of what it means to be a person of color in this culture, is that we have hijacked that term and took it from you, ain't giving it back. Plus, you use it anyway, you just don't say it. And so, when white brothers and sisters engage in a serious conversation about race in this country, then we force ourselves to talk about white privilege, white innocence, white fragility, white vulnerability. White folk going around talking about, you snowflakes, you're so sensitive, you need safe spaces, when you white America is a safe space. And when you're a person of color, it's hard to live in Idaho. We just don't want to live there just to have to say the name of that state. They already think we're loose. See, they admitted it, Idaho, I told you. When white folk have an honest conversation about race, if Malia shows up pregnant, she a hoe. Sarah Palin's daughter can do it twice. And she's just a young person making a mistake. When we have honest conversations about race, we begin to engage in some serious scrutiny of the institutional mechanisms that perpetuate inequality in this culture. But not only that, thirdly, if we gonna make some progress, we got to see that you can have a notion of difference without hierarchy. And that means everybody ain't got to be the same. You ain't got to be me, I ain't got to be you, but we could both be good. How come I got to look like you, talk like you, think like you? I don't care who you are. I is who I is. I do what I do. I am who I am. And that doesn't mean I'm not American. And so that diversity means that we have different understandings of what it means to be an American. If we take a knee because we are outraged at the way in which young people and older people of color and others are mistreated systematically by the police, and we bow down in reverence after speaking to a veteran who said that if you sit down, it's disrespectful, but if you take a knee, it shows reverence, and even that doesn't satisfy you? Because what we understand is ain't no protest gonna ever satisfy white folk who don't want Negroes to protest, right? I'm not saying all white folk don't want us to protest. Some of the bravest symbols of alliance, allyship, and solidarity have been with young white brothers and sisters out on the front lines marching. Heather Heyer died in Charlottesville. So we know that it's not a merely color-coordinated thing, but what I'm arguing is that when white folks say, hey, there's a right way to protest, Pharaoh can't tell the slave how to rebel. Hey, I'm a denizen of rape culture, but I want to tell you how to successfully protest harassment. These women are going ham right now. They are like, we ain't having it. Don't be sticking your tongue where I ain't inviting it. Don't be putting your hand where it ain't supposed to be. Don't be patting my fanny as old boy behavior. Part of rape culture. Oh, but we know about that because our women had no control over their bodies. We've been used to rape culture. Sally Hemings with Thomas Jefferson. We know what that means. Y'all catching up. We've been done known about that. Even when white women were standing by, victimized themselves with their husbands who brutalized them and raped us. Rape culture didn't begin recently. Sexual harassment was inscribed into the very nature of democratic process in America. The very notion of white manhood rests upon rape culture. The unlimited access to the erotic excess of the culture. Black women were unrapeable because they were not victims of rape, because they were owned as property. You can't tell women how to protest your masculinist, misogynistic, patriarchal, male supremacist, femophobic identity. No. Stop. Cease and desist. And so you can't tell us that, well, if you protest this way, Bob, it would be better. That's the point. If it don't make you uncomfortable, it ain't successful. If it's pissing you off, point made. These same people who get upset because the flag is being disrespected didn't seem to mind it in 1976 when a black lawyer in Boston got beat with a flag. These same people didn't mind it when black prisoners of war returned from Germany. Black soldiers returned from Germany with prisoners of war who sat in first class in a whites-only section while those black men and women who had devoted themselves to the freedom of this nation sat in the cotton curtain of apartheid. Didn't seem to mind it then. Didn't seem to think that it was about patriotism then. Colin Kaepernick is not against the flag. He's against the refusal to honor the flag with the virtue of American democracy, freedom, and justice. He's not against the darn song, even though the third verse is jacked up. Right? He's against injustice, and if it takes, look at white privilege. If all you got to be mad about is a disrespect for a flag while actual bodies of black people are returning home in a body bag, you are privileged. You mad at a flag. And did I get something wrong? Only in a fascist nation does the military dictate the terms of citizenship. This is not a banana republic where the head of state is an army man, military person. Unless it was Eisenhower after he gave it up and ran. Right? This is not that. So as much as I love the sacrifice the military made, they ain't the only ones who sacrificed for freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't go to Germany, but he went to Birmingham, and both of them dropped bombs. When you celebrate veterans, Day celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Joanne Robinson and James Baldwin and Angela Davis and Viola Luizzo and James Reeb and Malcolm X. They are veterans in the war to make America better. I celebrate these men and women who are brave, who go to foreign theaters of war, but they do so in part to protect my freedom of speech. And they are not the only ones who have sacrificed for this nation to become what it is. Martin Luther King Jr. took a bullet on the balcony in Memphis. He too is an American hero. And so only in a fascist nation does the military determine what the standard of democracy will be. And ain't nobody disrespecting a soldier by asking the nation to live up to the ideals for which the soldier is willing to die. I'm almost done. And then finally, as you've seen me talk here today, if we're going to really challenge racism at its heart, we got to be for everybody and all victims of oppression, both in this nation, in our community, and in this world. One of the saddest things to me is to go to some black churches that don't permit women to speak from the pulpit. This is 2017. Are we still on that? Sit down there. This is holy ground. Really? I spoke at a black church in the Texas area. I won't say the state. It wasn't Dallas. It was a worthless place, some would say. I don't believe that. So I'm speaking there, and older minister invited me. I finished. He said, "Oh, Dr. Dyson's a brilliant scholar, one of the greatest minds, blah, blah, blah." But he said when he started talking that stuff about women, as long as I got breath in me, women know their place. In a church that literally began when white people refused to acknowledge our humanity, and we seceded like the South did, except we were forced out, and then started our own thing. And you mean that church that built itself upon those principles would deny women? My Bible tells me if you don't cry out, the rock's gonna cry. I mean, you mean God can ordain an inanimate object? Reverend Rock? But not a woman? What kind of God are you worshiping? Is that God that puny? God is that limited in power that God can't even speak through a woman? I thought God could do anything but fail. But God can't speak through a woman. If it wasn't for women, you wouldn't even know Jesus' name. Because the men ran scared. They were scared. They were, I don't know him. I don't even know the dude, man. Don't be talking about, I don't know him. He on Rockefeller Records. I'm on Tommy Boy. I don't know him. Women stayed there and hung out. Because the women are always the one that's going to stay with you to the end. I don't want to make a general statement, but women are better than men. I don't want to say that because I love men. I'm one of them myself. I happen to love masculinity and our male identity. But really, dude, at the end of the day, women are just better people. I'm not romanticizing women. I know they nasty and ridiculous and crazy. But we nasty, ridiculous, and crazy with muscles and power and stupidity. And we weaponize our masculinity in deployment of an ideal of who we are that punishes people. Mostly some of these white guys going around killing people in churches killed their wives first. the relationship between domestic violence and terror. And who's doing it? It ain't Muhammad, it's Billy Bob. Oh, I know you don't want to hear that, but Billy Bob done tore some shit up in here. It ain't Allahu Akbar, it's thank you, Jesus, and ooh. The manipulation of religion in defense of terror didn't start with Islam, it started with burning a cross on a lawn. That's white terrorism, that's Christian terrorism. And so, when we think about the fact that here we are starting in a church that organized itself around the principles of love and democracy and freedom and justice, that women can't even talk, and women have been the bedrock of our existence in the black community. I mean, now we know when Jesus went to the woman at the well asking for a drink of water, you know that wasn't no sister. Because he asked for a drink of water and she gave it to him, they talking. He asked her where her husband is. Told her she had 5, to hell. You know that wasn't no sister. Because as soon as Jesus said, where your husband at? You God, you tell me. I've been waiting on him for 25 years. And you ain't sent him here yet. What's wrong with you? But not only the gender aspect, the gay and lesbian aspect. Why is it that black folk think that we could get away with being homophobic in our churches? I mean, when I was coming up, I'm 59, October, my birthday, I thank Jesus, but you know, we knew Andre was gay. And Andre was in the neighborhood and helped me out, could fight. Oh, ho, ho, ho! Mess with me, Andre. Andre would whip that behind and enjoy it while he was doing it. We knew who was gay in the church. We knew who was singing in the choir. We knew. How did we get to this homophobic? Like, oh, you're going to hell if you're gay. What? I had a woman come up to me. I was preaching in Cleveland the other day. I'm almost done. She says, I plead the blood of Jesus on you. I said, man, that's old school. That's some old school Pentecostal. I plead the blood of Jesus. I said, do they even say that anymore? That's amazing. She said, I plead the blood of Jesus on you. I had finished speaking in church. She said, you're going to hell. I said, damn, you, really? Did Jesus tell you I'm going to hell? I said, I might as well send some more. I didn't know. I thought I was good. She got mad at me. She says, you're going to hell. I said, why? She says, you know being gay is evil and wrong. I said, ma'am, I don't want to get in that conversation, but I said, if you read the book, it's a complicated book. I said, you ain't doing everything that book say. I'm just saying, if thy right eye offend thee, cut it out. You look like you got both eyes. And I know you done have been offended because you ain't perfect. That means you sinned. How come your eye ain't out? If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off. Where your hand? I see both your hands. You got a nice pedicure. You think I'm lying? I said, plus you a woman. Why are you talking to me? I said, you have no authority over me. The Bible says I'm a man of God, ordained. Be down. Shut up. Sit down. Be humble. She mad as hell now. You're going to hell. And then wouldn't even let me talk. I said, if we gonna argue, let's argue. I ain't one of them preachers go, bless you, Jesus. I'm gonna argue with you. Because I'm tired of the business. In the name of God, my religion is love. Forget all the rest. How you gonna be with Joel Osteen, who got more black members in his church than most black super churches, mega churches, or Paula White, who preaches to black people in the black style, but they're down with Trump and his racist agenda. But you might be suspicious of Ta-Nehisi Coates and Jelani Cobb at the Atlantic and the New Yorker because they're atheists. I'm down with the atheists who understand that their blackness has constituted their offense to this culture. You might be another religion. I was in school at a Christian school, and the teacher said in Greek, if Gandhi ain't in heaven, ain't nobody going. Oh my God, Gandhi's not Christian. He said, if Gandhi ain't in heaven, nobody is there. Hello? Now, I know that challenges some of our narrow beliefs. We hear how black people going to be biblical literalists and couldn't read the Bible for 150 years? You were illiterate all that time. They didn't let you read. What you reading? How you going to be literate and literal about something you couldn't read? So beating up on, I ain't never been to a black church that turns down gay tithes. Not a one. Only fundamental they don't want is change. Then black people get retroactively homophobic. Had I known you were gay, I would have never accepted that 4-year scholarship you gave me to Wayne State that allowed me to prosper and get out of the ghetto and become the person I am today. How can you justify and legitimate your sexism or your homophobia and you black in a culture that has demonized you? So all I'm asking, and then the prejudice against young people. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, there was a comedian going around the country. He stopped by Detroit too. And the Jell-O and the pudding pop. Just wanted you to understand. I wrote a book, Negroes got mad at me. How dare you? How dare you? Y'all were drugged too. All 50, 60 women wrong, right? Yeah. Same MO. Here you are beating up on young people because their pants are sagging. Who couldn't hold them up? We don't want to hear that truth. Bourgeois Negro rebellion against the so-called pathology of young black culture, while somebody lecturing you is dropping Mickeys, roofies, Mollies, not wearing Tom Ford. I don't pop Mollies, I rock Tom Ford. Come on, y'all. I gotta explain that to you. What's up with that? Aren't you Jay-Z scholars? When the rim is in the system, ain't no telling will I love him, will I diss him? That's what they be yelling, I'm a pimp by blood, not relation. Y'all still chase him out. Get on it, young people. And so he went out in the country talking about how people name their kids. Ain't none of your business. Unless you're paying child support, you don't get a vote. And trust me, even when you do, you might not still get a vote. Excuse me for that personal bitterness that came back to me about exactly 39 years ago. Excuse me. What's up, my son? That's his age. So how you gonna talk about what people name their kids? Shaniqua and Taliqua and Muhammad, he said, and all that crap, and they're all in jail. If a white man had said that, you would go mad. Black man tells you Shaniqua, Taliqua, Muhammad, and all that crap, and they're all in jail. I know some people with unusual names. They're doing great stuff. Shaquille O'Neal. That's Nigerian and Irish. What is that? Black Irish? I'm not. Keyshawn Johnson. Right? Condoleezza? Rice? Condoleezza? I mean, ooh, that's different. Her mother's a musician, she is too, world class. Condicezza, Italian musical signature, sweet music. But she anglicized it, African Americanized it, and named it, he didn't want to name her daughter Condicezza, so she called her Condoleezza. Oprah? Who you know named Oprah besides? That's a unique Negro name right there. And you know, what was her name supposed to be? What? Orpah, out the Bible. But you know how Negroes do it. I thought that's what it said. I don't know. It ain't what your name is, it's what's on the inside of you. I know some Negroes with some real regular names, messing us up. One of them goes to work every day with 9 other people wearing long robes in Washington, D.C. He ain't got no unusual name. Do you know one of my favorite singers is Clarence Carter? There's some Negroes with regular names. Uncle Ben is an interesting icon in Black America. And so, my brothers and sisters, dogging your young people, talking about their sagging pants, maybe if you lifted their dreams, their draws would follow. That's why I listen to their music when I can understand it. I end here. You want to deal with race? You got to deal with the fact that you can't demonize other people. You got to extensively reflect upon your own bigotry and bias and then understand how we fit into a larger culture that continues to demonize us because of our race, and we must forge connections and bonds with all people who are victims, and no greater victims in the world today than black women and other women around the world. Too often, even white feminists are insensitive to the way in which black women have been mistreated. Black women's issues don't count the same way white women's issues do. Black and brown women's issues are not considered the same, and when finally women get outraged who are white, they ignore the fact that their black and brown counterparts and their red and yellow counterparts have been similarly demonized without recognition from them. Doesn't mean that the issues are not legitimate. It means that we have to deal with the way in which, just as sexism clouds the vision of race, racism clouds the vision of gender. And so, for my money, I think that if we're going to deal with race, we got to talk about the plight and predicament of black women. Despite the greatness that black women are and do, they're still victimized. Michelle Obama was hated on for some. She became one of the most popular figures in America, but she didn't start that way. And then some still said that she shouldn't be in Elle magazine or Vogue. She should be in, not Ebony and Jet, National Geographic as an animal. Same thing they said about Serena Williams. Still, to this day, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust. Black women keep on coming. And so if we're going to deal with race, we got to deal ultimately with the plight and predicament of black women today. Brown women today, women of color today. And see, I'm from a generation, with all this madness out here, I'm from a generation where these young people, they don't get it. I mean, I grew up with the Temptations, so did you. And all the groups that came out of Detroit that folk don't even give recognition. Enchantment. Something strange is happening. Y'all don't know that about it. You don't belong to me anymore, it seems. I used to ride to work on that. It's you, baby, baby. It's you. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Y'all don't know nothing about that. See, in my day, we didn't mind admitting we were messing up. Jay-Z said, I can't come and see him coming down my eyes, so I make the song cry. That was before 444, when he apologized. But before he apologized, he said the tears weren't coming down his eyes. He couldn't admit it. We were crying with the song, Sunshine, Blue Skies, Please Go Away, Girls Find Another, and gone away. With her went my future. My life is filled with gloom, so day after day I stay. I know to you it might sound strange, but I wish it would have rained. Y'all don't know nothing about that. You young people are just stuck. I want to go outside in the rain. I may sound crazy. Y'all don't know nothing about that. The Dramatics, Ron Banks and L.J. Reynolds, y'all sleeping on them. But then the girl made us see things. Girl made us go crazy. We didn't mind saying it. Have you seen her? Tell me, have you seen her? I see her face as the cold wind blows on the street, even at the. Have you seen? Why We got philosophical about it. Oh, why? Did she have to leave and go away? Oh, I've been used. You could understand every word they were saying, young people. I just want you to know, I've been used to having someone. Now I'm at the mall. You're here. I'm there. Where are you? Then the girl made us see things. Today I saw somebody who, guess what? She walked. What's this? I thought it was. But wait a minute. As she turned the corner, Shanae, Shanae. I felt so ashamed that it wasn't she. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Then they said, wait a minute, you ain't my girl, but I thought you was my girl, but that's all right. You still fine. Can I get that math? Then the girl turned us into a stalker, didn't she? Each day through my window, I watch her as... Really? How many days you been watching that girl? For 3 years, somebody called the police on that stalker. And then y'all bragging to the girl what you got. I might light your wrist. Why you bragging to the... See if she like you for you. Right? When you're in the center ring and their lines don't mean a why don't you let me try? Now watch this. Now I don't wear I ain't got no goods for you, girl. I don't. Now this is a Pentecostal love song right here. Watch this. They're gonna speak in tongues. All I know is, there you go, speak in tongues right there. I love you. Y'all don't remember? Oh, baby, please. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Now what they singing? You remind me of my Jeep. I love Trey songs. You gonna think I invented sex? No, you didn't. I think Barry White might have had something to do with that. Huh? Playing your game, baby, just you and me. Y'all don't know nothing about him. I think Marvin Gaye might have had something to do with it. Y'all remember Marvin Gaye? I don't see nothing wrong with you. Giving yourself to me can never be if the Spirit moves you. Did that Negro just bring the Holy Ghost up into the bedroom? I think Teddy Pendergrass knew something about it. Huh? He started off like Obama, real smooth. Close the door, baby. Then he ended up like Al Sharpton. Turn him off! I'm done. Maybe the ultimate reason that we should invest in black women because we should not be scared of strong black or brown or red or yellow or white women. We should celebrate women. And let me tell you what, you think Harriet Tubman wasn't a strong black woman? What do you think Harriet did? Excuse me. There's a thing called the Underground Railroad. Would like you guys to come along. It's really cool. That ain't what she said. Be here tonight at 8:30. And don't be late. Then them Negroes came, Miss Tubman, we was going to go, but we done changed our minds. But we's not going to tell nobody. Oh, she said, I know you won't. She had a Bible in one hand. Y'all don't remember Junior Walker and the All-Stars, do you? Shotgun, shoot him for it. Harriet had to knock some of them Negroes out. Y'all remember that? Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. Mama said, and she knocked him out. And when they woke up, where I is, nigga, you're free. We done drug your black butt to freedom. And women are still dragging us to freedom. Stay woke, that's what they're telling us. Stay woke, that's what they're telling us. Stay woke, peace.
Thank you very much. If you think you've had a fascinating evening with him, he's even going to take some questions. I don't know any way to follow that, so I'd like to invite you to go to either side. There are our students are holding microphones, and if you would just go and ask your questions, line up there, we would be glad to take a few questions. There is a book signing following the Q&A. That will be out in the foyer. There's also a university bookstore with books if you don't already have one. So do we have questions over on the far right side? So why don't we take that from DeAndrea? Go right ahead.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, where would you place Detroit in its history within the big picture that you've been drawing?
Now in history or anywhere I want to start? Well, first of all, I just love Detroit. That's number one. Great city, great resources. Henry Ford drawing people here by the promise of a wage that was living. White brothers and sisters came in. Then from the South, the Great Black Migration. My mother from Alabama, daddy from Georgia, right? Mississippi Negroes went to Chicago. I mean, Mississippi ain't nothing but a suburb of Chicago. North Carolina Negroes went up to New York. Louisiana Negroes went to California. That's why Snoop Dogg talked that way. 1, 2, 3 into the 4. Snoop Doggy Dogg and Dr. Dre is at the door, right? So you can index the Great Black Migration by the rhetorical patterns and the verbal invention of black people located in various places and spaces and geographies along the way, the path of outmigration. But Detroit was so incredibly important, the home of the automobile, literally putting America on the road, literally as a metaphor and a literal inscription of mobility. The ideal city, the city was called. The model city is the word that was used. Ironically enough, for race relations. Think about the 43 riot. Think about the 67 rebellion and the uprising and what occurred. And in that desolate hotel, if you saw Catherine Bigelow's film, and I know that there's a documentary on Coleman Young coming and one on Kenneth Cockrell that will fill in the blanks. But when you think about the fact that Detroit was both the home of the automobile and Motown, black ingenuity at the highest level and creativity, artistically, the home of such great preaching, C.L. Franklin, Charles Adams, Cornell Talley, Frederick George Sampson, C.L. Franklin. I mean, man, Aretha's daddy. The freakish precocity of Aretha was not by happenstance. She was birthed from the verbal wizardry and virtuosity of a rhetorical master like C.L. Franklin. You don't have me, right? So when you think about Detroit, you think about white working class upward mobility. You think about the convergence of ultimately conflicting and sometimes contradictory, but also coalescing factors of class, and the way in which the union movement took strength here. The United Auto Workers, of which my father was a member, and so was I later, when I worked at Kelsey Hayes Wheel Brake and Drum Factory up on McGraw. Wasn't no summer job. And so when I think about Detroit, I think about all of the vibrancy of the work ethic of the people and the possibility of jobs, and I think about the radical segregation of the city. And I think about after 1967, though arguments have been made about what factors drove white brothers and sisters away from the city, but the collar counties that ringed this city were populated by white people who often took their money from Detroit and depleted this economic base of its resource, and then replenishing suburbia predicated upon economic energy within Detroit. And so the history of black power here, 1974 with the election of Coleman Young. Before that, I was a victim personally of stress, Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets. And when I saw the Big Four came down, and the Big Four came down on me plenty of times. And when I saw Kenneth Cockrell on TV, that was an inspiration. I mean, using them big words and calling the judge into question and all kind of names too. I was like, man, what? Hey, that's sexy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
We'll get another question.
All right, but let me finish right there. Okay, I know I'm gonna be short on the next one, but let me finish saying this. So when Detroit converges, gels, and then rips apart, when race rips this city apart, and it is yet to recover, still on a vibrant recovery, the receivership of this city, the, in one sense, undercutting systematically of black political authority. I ain't got nothing against the present mayor right now. God bless him. If he can continue to do well, do well. But they gave the resources to a white man they would never give to a black one. Now, I'm just saying that. I'm saying that, I'm talking about in terms of both corporate strings and governmental ones. Even the black President Obama was very wary. This ain't no mere racial thing, right? Obama was complicated, right? Came here to take a lap, and he should have, to celebrate the fact that he bailed out the automobile industry but wouldn't go 60 miles up the road to Flint while he was here, while those people were dying with poison water. You the president. So I'm not going to romanticize mistakes, and yet we also know that they didn't hug, Obama included, Dave Bing the same way that Brother Mike has been beneficiary of, and Dan Gilbert wasn't given the same kind of support, with 90 buildings being owned, greatest private property owner here, the reterritorialization of the post-industrial urban space of the inner city, the remarking of urban space, the pushing out of marginal people through gentrification back into suburbia where they were historically denied. Jobs went out there, but they didn't have transportation, and now returning to Detroit to take it back over, and the sign says, "This is the Detroit we see." So that's true too. That's true too.
Okay.
Sorry, sir. I just wanted
That's
to make
all right. Professor, we'll take
I'll
one
be much
question.
shorter now.
We asked that the questions are short, but the answers are going to be brief also.
Yes. Jeopardy round. Yes, no, maybe. All right.
Okay, real quick. My question is, based on your talk, which we appreciate, what is your solution to bringing white and black races together?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sister Wilson. So first of all, what I talked about, the honesty of conversation has to occur. There's no possibility of us coming together unless we talk about it first. Number two, I suggest in my book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, that white folk confront white innocence, white fragility, and tell the truth about what that might mean. And then number three, engage in real honest conversation with black people and brown people and talk about the values, the perspectives, and the desires that have been distorted through stereotype. Number four, figure out a way for white brothers and sisters to become real allies of social justice movements. And many white people have been doing this. I mean, showing up at these marches. One of the beautiful things I like when they're protesting in Congress or getting arrested or going to these Antifa movements against some of the fascism. A lot of white brothers and sisters out there on the front line, just as it was true in the civil rights movement. But forging those kind of connections and allyship is extremely important. And then voting in a way that not simply at the top of the ballot, which is extremely important, but down ballot. Because a lot of the people who are going to make a difference in your life are prosecutors, local elected officials. And we've got to address that through systematic voting. And we got to talk about voter suppression. There's no sense of talking about racial justice in America without talking about, let's not just talk about Russia. It's those depot machines. It's what happened in America at the behest of politicians who sought to undercut and undermine the ability of black people and brown people and elderly people and some Jewish people to vote. So those, to me, are very practical things to be done. And then let's address the situation in our schools. And it's no such thing as coming together to reconcile before we tell the truth about the bitter division. We can't reconcile because we sing kumbaya, and I agree to tell you a lie if you agree to lie to me. No, we can't do that. Only when we tell the truth, the uncomfortable, ugly, inconvenient, powerfully nasty, sometimes bitterly brutal truth, then we can engage together in activities to challenge both ourselves, as you saw me in this lecture do, as well as embrace each other across that chasm to make sure we can go forward. So those are some of the practical things, I think. And then become an activist in your local schools. They're kicking kids out for nothing. And these kids are being marked. So what happens? They go to juvenile detention, which becomes a holding cell for jail, which becomes a feeder system to prison. This is what's happening under our watch. And then mentor. The final thing you can do practical, mentor some poor and black kids, some brown kids, some kids who need your help. If you, here's the order already. Number one, white women. I'm talking about mentoring black kids. Number one, volunteer, white woman.
Yep.
Number two, black women. 3, white men. 4, brothers. Come on. Come on. So we got to do better than that, all of us across the board. Those are some practical things that can be done to bring us together to understand the serious nature of what we confront.
Okay. I'll take one question from that side now. DeAndrea?
Hello, my name is Irvin, and my question is about the Civil War. The brutal truth is that the South really don't think they lost the war, and we're so focused on the executive branch, the legislative branch, that we're really letting the smoke cloud our eyes on what's going on with the judiciary. We got Beauregard Sessions in there, who's walked the halls of Congress for 35 years, preaching white supremacy. Nobody's watching him. Claretta King put a word out on him. Nobody said nothing about it since her. So what are we doing to, how do I say this, enforce the fact that we've been asleep for the 35 years he's been walking the halls of Congress?
Okay, that's
Right. You just said it. Amen. Okay. And that's what I meant by both the local level in terms of prosecutor, but the Justice Department is serious, right? Now, the fact is that, are you leaving? Are you listening? Okay, maybe the amplification will get, I know he left. The reality is that it is true that Jeff Sessions is in trouble right now for a variety of reasons, lying and stuff like that, or not remembering that he had a meeting. Okay. So the reality is he's absolutely right. The Justice Department is real. Politicians who occupy our spaces in American political life are real, civic life are real. We have to pay attention to that. And by paying attention to that, it's not either or. It is executive branch, it is judicial as well. That's why these judges that are being appointed that make mandatory minimum laws have to be challenged. That's why Eric Holder was so significant. That's why the President Attorney General is so problematic. He's trying to restart the war on drugs. He's trying to use the political power of the presidency to intimidate the judiciary by thinking about hunting after Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton right now again, which is obstructing justice in a fundamental sense. So he's absolutely right in terms of the consequences of the judiciary, but we have to pay attention to all that simultaneously, and it's not one or the other, it's both and.
Okay, we can take 2 more questions, and I'm going to go to this side. Go right ahead.
Hi,
Please keep your questions very, very brief.
Okay, how you doing, Dr. Dyson?
How you doing?
My name is Bomani. I've been stopped by Big Four several times, too, in my life. But
Yes,
anyway,
sir.
what I want to talk about, you already talked about, what's happening to the gentrification of Detroit. What are you thinking about the black folks in Detroit who are collaborating with that gentrification, that collaborating with the takeover of Detroit? What do you think about those people? Because they've all got reelected to the city council, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Well, that's local shit. I don't, Look, Zusammenarbeit is the German word for collaboration. Zusammenarbeit. And Zusammenarbeit occurred, I'm gonna just tell you a story. You draw whatever consequences you want from it. So in Zusammenarbeit, there's a book recently published about the collaboration and the collaborators. It was about Hitler in the 30s in Berlin when All Quiet on the Western Front played there. And Hitler and his people got upset and rioted. Hollywood studio heads began to collaborate with Hitler and German Nazi forces because they didn't want to compromise the marketplace. So in not wanting to compromise the marketplace, they began to collaborate with Hitler, and soon Hitler and his folk were determining the nature and shape of the films in their country. If they didn't like a scene, it was cut. If they didn't like the entire movie, it was scuttled. The tragedy is that many of the collaborators from the studio heads in Hollywood were Jewish. And they were collaborating with a Nazi force that hated Jewish people. Just an interesting story that you might want to consider. Yes. Next question.
Go right.
Yes, sir. All right.
Yes. We'll take one question from this side and one more from this side. I'm afraid that will be it because we have to do book signing outside. One more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Janelle, and I am in a leadership position, and often I realize some of the most egregious sexism I experience is from other black men. So how do I challenge black men on sexism and not come off as angry, irate, and, oh, you just one of them sisters, so.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know. First of all, you got a great voice. I mean, you're, right? Do you do radio? I mean, you know, you got money right up in them pipes right there. You know, I'm just saying, if whatever you're doing right now on the side, this is the Quiet Storm with Janelle. You could kill him, sister. You could kill him. All right. I mean, come on, dudes. Come on. I mean, these are the 7% of dudes, 9, you know, who voted for Trump, right? I mean, don't want to see no woman in charge. Y'all got it better. Y'all black women got it better than men. How? I mean, everything black men are catching, what black women are catching too, plus, right? Plus some stuff. Plus they got the kids, right? They got to worry about. And the two greatest, the two strongest indices of poverty, occupying gender and age, women and children. So it is true in a patriarchal culture, sometimes another patriarch, a potential man, might be seen as more lethal and in competition with white men. I can understand that as an abstract philosophical argument, but in terms of on-the-ground reality, to beat up on black women and say you one of them kind of sisters, you one of them kind of brothers. They want us kind of sisters to be, I mean, if you don't want a woman equal to your stature, right? What is the problem? Do you want her to be subordinate to you? Do you want her to be submissive? I mean, I think the best love comes when people recognize each other, right? Like Barack and Michelle, J and B, you know what I'm saying? Wilson and Wilson, law firm down here. I mean, Reed and Reed. So my point is, and it's better that way when you're dealing with somebody who's your equal. Not somebody you have to subordinate, not somebody has to be submissive, but although we could be mutually submissive, right? And we can recognize the women in my life have run me, so let me just be real with it. I'm henpecked like a big dog. Because the pecking is really great. And women know most stuff. Like, she be right most of the time anyway. I hate to admit it, but it's just be real. I was like, just do it her way the first way. Just be done. But if you can't recognize another person who happens to be your wife or the woman in your life or a sister in your life, and you've got to replay those patriarchal tapes and you've got to dismiss the legitimacy and validity of another human being based upon gender, and you got to be intimidated by them, then you got to look in yourself. You can't dog who you are. And from what I can see from here, you're obviously highly intelligent, highly articulate, exquisitely chocolate. I mean, I'm just ebony ecstasy informed by, coffee flesh. I'm saying. In public, no problems. What I'm saying is that you got it all and that. And sometimes that package intimidates people. Sometimes just being fine and intelligent and formidable just scares people. And you got to get over it, brothers. You got to accept and celebrate women. And when we celebrate our women, our mothers, who's fought harder for us than black women? Who has fought harder for black men than black women? I don't know nobody. On the front line of every movement, black women speaking up for black men. We got to return the favor. Stop the bitch, the hoe, the skeezer, the slut, the hood rat, the chicken head. Stop. Stop it. And stop demonizing women. And even if you're with them and they using the B word, that's them, that's not you. I'm always around women going, this bitch, blah, blah. Now, if I try to say, yeah, that bit, no. No, now. That's not my role. That's like a white person said, hi, you nigger. Nah, no. So my point is, we have to check our own masculine prerogatives, our own male supremacy, our own patriarchal perspectives, and at the same time acknowledge that the hurt and pain we feel and endure is felt and endured by women as well. We can talk about the specific forms that black masculine suffering takes. Now that's honest, that's legitimate, but we can't use it to obscure the hurt and pain that black women feel. That's why we have to have an intersectional analysis where we take a consideration of gender and class and sexual orientation and the like. All right?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to say that was the last question. Professor Dyson actually has a speech in Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning. He has people standing outside in lines now to sign books, and so I think I'm going to have to make an executive decision and say, sir, thank you very much for a most delightful evening. I would like to invite you to keep track of the FOCIS programs. On April 12th, we will have General David Petraeus, retired, who will give an evening on national security. You'll stay tuned. Please. Just line up in the lobby if you have books.